Okay, up to now we've been talking about founding the company, the co-founders, and all sorts of aspects around that, and the team, issues around the team. Now let's talk about beyond the team, right? And that is when you start to hire people. There are a number of dilemmas you can run into, right? Beyond selecting the founder, right? And those include that one of the reasons you hire people is because you have holes in the founding team's experience level. So you want to bring in people that can actually fill those holes. And, and as growth in the company occurs, you need people that have human and social and financial capital. So founders have to look to non-founders for resources, right? And the two most important that you look for when it comes to hires is non-founding hires, right? People that you're going to bring into the organization to make the company hopefully grow and excel. And then investors, people that can fund your company's growth. So, who you hire, what roles they play, rewards they get are all some of the dilemmas that you will face when we talk about beyond the team. So remember my schematic, okay? We've gone past the founding team dilemmas and roles and relationships and rewards, and now we're talking about beyond the team. So this is kind of the end of the founding dilemmas sequence here. And the question is, who do we hire? What investors do we need to involve ourselves with? And then I keep bringing up this succession question, and that's something we'll talk about near the end of this half of the course, but it relates to succession of the CEO. Okay, so the stage at which the company finds itself will have an impact on these dilemmas you face when you hire people, okay? If you're at the startup stage, you have no formal structure, you have limited resources, you probably have a very close-knit team with an informal culture, and you're all emphasized on being creative, what have you. But when you move in kind of into a transitional stage, when maybe you get your first serious funding, and you get maybe your first product gets completed and put into the market, you have to add resources, both capital and revenues, right? You can get resources from selling your product. That would be a wonderful thing. But you also got to raise capital, right? So both of these new requirements add a different set of skill sets and processes that are required. And then as the company matures, and by now it's well-funded, hopefully revenues are growing, you have this decentralized and more hierarchical decision-making process in place, probably. I'm pretty sure that's in most cases. And there's a much less premium on flexibility of the employee, meaning, is it a generalist or a specialist? I think as the company gets more mature, you tend to hire more specialist types of people. So choosing the new hires falls into the same 3R categories that the founding team did, right? Relationships is who to hire, roles is what positions you need to hire for, and then how do you reward them, okay? But these 3R decisions are based upon different founder motivations that get adjusted during the stage of the company's life cycle. So let's talk about where does a startup find senior executives from, non-founding senior executives? Well, it depends really on a couple of things. Many founding CEOs of very fast-growing startups will go into their own network or others within the organizations, other networks within the people in the organization to look for people, okay? Across all C-level and VP level hires, 49%, this is this data that we've collected. Again, I want to keep reminding you that this information is all from this data that was collected among 16,000 founders. 49% of all C-level and VP hires come from the network of the CEO. Now, why is that the case? Well, because they're more comfortable hiring people that they know, right? A number of reasons. Hopefully let's give them the benefit of that and say primarily because they know the capabilities of the people and they're going to hire the best person for the job. I wish that were always the case, but part of it may be that they will feel like, okay, I need somebody on my side here. I want to make sure that, this person's going to be loyal to me, so I'll bring somebody in that I know, even though they may not necessarily be the best person for the job. But, the other reason behind this is, what's the next source of hires? Where do you find hires if you don't look inside your own network? Well, you find them from your investor group and from board members. And that can give a lot of CEOs a lot of heartburn, right? I mean, because they're thinking, okay, well, this person's going to be a mole. They're going to report back to the investor and tell them if I'm doing something that's not right. And, I'll feel like, that I really can't speak freely, and all these types of silly thoughts, right? So, but the interesting part of this is that in very early stage companies, the investors really don't source a lot of the hires. Most of the hires are sourced by the CEO's network or comparable executives in the organization's networks. But by the second round of funding, and that's probably, let's say, anywhere from 2 to 5 years down the path, investors source about 20% of all hires, and in the case of a CFO, even higher, which I think makes it's logical when you think about it. CFOs tend to be aligned more with these VC groups, investors and what have you. Okay, so here's a little graphical interface that shows, where do hires come from. The blue line at the top is the CEO. So you can see on the pre-funding stage, 65% of all hires come out of the CEO's network. And in the case of, the black line is other, that means all other, I guess. And you see the investor and the non-executive CEO, the non-CEO executive, those almost make no hires at the early stage. But as time goes by, the influence of these people becomes greater, and the sourcing of the hires decreases from the CEO's network as the company becomes more mature. So I talked about this in a couple of lectures ago. I used this terminology, playing with fire, and that's hiring friends and family. And that's because these teams whose members have prior relationships, they're less likely to discuss issues that are sensitive, because if they do, they see that it's going to damage their relationship if things turn sour. So hiring people with very strong ties to the co-founder can have problems, with them underperforming, but not being taken to task for doing that. So the dynamics of hiring somebody from your friends or family group creates real problems for the people who are not part of that group, the clique of friends and family, and that could be an internal organizational difficulty that could really cause havoc in your organization. So you've got to be really careful about hiring, particularly family members, but even friends. They have to be treated the same way as a non-friend or family person would be, or you can create all sorts of organizational problems. So here is another graphical chart that shows when are new positions created, and it shows each funding round. Obviously in the early days, C-level employees all outweigh the VP levels, and I guess you could, in the case of my company, we could say it was 2 to 0 because we had 2 C-level employees and no VPs or anything. But as time goes by, the number of VP level positions tends to normalize with the number of C-level employees. And as this will show you, the roles of these non-executive employees to the executives, or how many, not the roles, a ratio of non-executive employees to the executives, as it should do. I mean, in the early days, there's 2.5. The ratio is 2.5. With each round of funding, the ratio goes up, as it should. I mean, you want to have, otherwise you have a really top-heavy organization, which makes kind of not a lot of sense. And by the 5th round, or A, B, C, 5th round, I mean, you got 9 non-executives to every 1 executive, which makes a lot more sense. So the question you ask yourself is, okay, who do I hire? Okay, and I think the answer to that's fairly straightforward. Okay, do you want to hire a generalist or do you want to hire a specialist? Well, in the early stage of the company, you want to hire generalists. You want to hire people who understand across various functional organizations in the company, so they can handle various tasks. Because you can't hire a marketing and sales and a financial person and a product development. You have to have people that are generalists. But as the company matures, then you want to hire specialists. And the only exception to this rule about hiring generalists in an early stage company is that we're talking about software engineers. If you're a development company, you're building a technology product, building software, then obviously you need to have software engineers, and those people are specialists in what they do. And then the other question is, should I hire somebody with a big company experience or small company experience? And there are pros and cons of both of these things. And being a person who came out of a multinational, billion-dollar company to start into the small, early stage world, the big company people learn really good stuff. They learn process and they learn systems, and they probably at the early stage learn across a large number of functions. But depending upon how long they're in that corporate world, and how far they go and how kind of bureaucratic they get, it can be counterproductive at times. And as the saying goes at the bottom of the slide there, if you end up with a person who can crank, but he can't build the crank. He's so structured that he basically at some point he basically just manages everything, but can't actually get in there and roll his sleeves up and get the job done. So that's an interesting question. That, not a question really, it's really just something you need to be aware of. That big company experience can be beneficial. It can also have some problems attached to it. So again, whom to hire, and when, okay? Well, experienced versus inexperienced, okay? Obviously, a lot of times this is driven by your resources. What resources do you have? And if you have limited resources, then obviously you have to hire less experienced people, unfortunately. And obviously the benefit of experience is that person, an experienced person will have, better developed skills, you hope, more contacts, a higher level of credibility as far as their performance levels, part of the discussion around these hiring benefits of experience, hiring people with experience is the expression Mr. Right, which would be the highly experienced person, versus Mr. Right Now, just person who's available to kind of jump in and start working. So these are things you have to kind of balance as you're thinking about, balancing the issue of, how much experience do I want a person to have, given, the overall constrainment, which is primarily an early stage company, financial resources. So the downside to hiring experienced people, of course, is that they get paid more. And it's hard for somebody. I mean, take it from me. I did this, right? As I said, I had worked at a company, major corporation, that I was getting a six-figure salary, big six-figure salary, and then I started my own company, and I was making almost not enough to live on. And so these people have high compensation packages, and it's really hard to go backwards. So you just have to understand that that's one of the negative aspects of trying to hire an experienced person. The other aspect is these people may be, quote unquote, know-it-alls. They've been there. Oh, well, I came from this big company and I know how to do things. You guys are just a little startup company. You guys don't know how things should be done. Those people, don't hire them. If you can suss that out when you first talk to them or interview them, you're better off not hiring people like that. So one of the things you can do to kind of counteract this issue of experience being expensive is you can hire what we call rising stars. So these are people that are really good at what they do, really capable, but they're relatively inexperienced. So that means that they cost less to hire, and they may not handle, kind of swings in the businesses. If you have cyclical things going on in the economy or what have you, they may not be able to handle that as much as an experienced person would. But they're less expensive, and if they can learn quickly, they can grow into the job. So that's a potential way to deal with with hiring people who are expensive and also experienced.